You're listening to the Nature's Image Farm podcast. I'm your host, Greg Burns, and we're talking bees, homesteading, and the old-time ways. This episode is brought to you by HIVE wax-dipped equipment. No paint, no rot, no hassle. HIVE, built to endure. Now, on to the show. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. Hope you and your bees are doing good, that you're enjoying this August heat wave nearly all over the entire country, and hope you guys are doing well. Bruce, good to see you in here tonight. How's things going in your neck of the woods?
They're going okay, as far as I know.
Good. Well, our pal Brian is on a top secret mission. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get on. Let's just say it includes submarines and deep state spy tactics. That's all we can say for now. So he may or may not be able to jump on. So there you go. But appreciate everyone joining us tonight. It is August, and it seems like just when we thought we were going to get a little bit of a break from the heat snaps back in. Bees are back to bearding. Blooms are just firing off left and right. And ready or not, here fall comes. We've got goldenrod in full bloom. We've got ironweed just coming into its early bloom. It's going to get, hopefully, a little hectic here with blooms and such, but it's a great time to be spending the energy, both inputs, time, labor, and to putting everything you got into those bees right now. It's make or break time. And so all the things that we're doing right now are going to impact the ability of these bees to make it through the wintertime. And also forward thinking is going to impact on what we can do with these bees in the springtime. That's where my mind is right now. And I'm sure Bruce is in this similar state of mind. Before we get going, I just want to send a special shout out to him, to our pal Bill Fountain, who has passed on, local beekeeper and church member. If you guys would keep the Fountain family in your thoughts and prayers. Bill was a local beekeeper here and supplied the church and a lot of the local areas here with honey for many years. And now he has moved on to glory. So if you would, please keep the Fountain family in your thoughts and in your prayers. Bruce, what's going on down in your neck of the woods, down there in Dothan, Alabama?
Well, it's been pretty busy. We not a lot with the bees. I did do this past weekend was busy. We were working on something, Greg. I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but I did get some queens from Nature's Image Farm this past weekend. We got them all installed. We'll see how they do. Set up the splits and put them in there on Friday. The queens arrived, look beautiful. Put them in there. We'll see how they do. But that's really what I did. Believe it or not, I made some more splits. So I just can't stop. But yeah, right now it hasn't been as hot here, but it has continued to be very humid. We're getting rain almost every day. Just, not like rain all day, but like those afternoon thunderstorms, it's kind of the pattern I remember growing up, where seemingly almost every day you get a nice little thunderstorm or a rainstorm come through, and then the rest of the day it was hot and humid. But sometimes in the evening time it cools off a little bit if it rains in the evening time. But it's been kind of a good little weather pattern. I really haven't been in a lot of the bees. I haven't had a chance as much as I probably needed to be, but I haven't been in them a lot, so we'll see what happens. I do have some video footage that's backed up. I haven't had a chance to edit it and get it out there yet, so I don't know if or when I'm going to get all that stuff out. But really, it's just getting the splits made, checking on them. What I'm finding is I am having some queens, I think, that are beginning to fail. And so it was actually a really good time to get those queens, because I was able to to replace some of those, maybe, you know, split some of the weaker hives that, you know, hopefully had enough numbers in them, kind of maybe condense them down into one box and things like that. Just try to kind of, it'll be a good idea, a good opportunity to even if I split some that the queens are starting to fail a little bit, maybe the old queen, I'll have a replacement if the old queen goes ahead and fails. And so we'll see what happens. But I did the old queen excluder splits where you just shake all the bees below the queen excluder, make sure I had plenty of resources on the top and on the bottom, meaning brood and food and everything, kind of even things out. Stick all the bees down, make sure the queen was down below. That's theoretically, that's what I did. And then what I did to help these new queens, I hope it works. I moved the old queen away. Came back a few hours later. The bees had filled the boxes back up again. They'd all moved up on the brood, and so there's usually more bees in the bottom box though this time of year, and so I just took the bottom box, which theoretically had the old queen in it. That's what it's supposed to work anyway. Off to another spot, and then drop the top box down right on the original spot. So those bees, the foragers, will come back and make sure there's plenty of you know, bees in there. And then I also put some painter's tape on the end of the candy, because I put them in there the same day, and I poked a little hole in there to make them take an extra day or so to get the queen out. I think it's going to work out well. I've done that. That's what I've been doing recently, and it works well. So we'll see, Greg. Hopefully they work. Hopefully, first of all, we got to get them accepted, and then we'll see how they do. But,
I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that here. Maybe we'll save that for maybe 2 or 3 more weeks once you've got a little bit more feedback.
Yeah,
and then I'll have some equal feedback. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I did do, and you sent me some buckets. We got some buckets from you down here to try. I did go ahead and put, you know, full thickness, you know, just full strength syrup on them, and that they hadn't eaten much of it. They had not consumed hardly any of it from the previous week. But I do think, you know, that there were bees up in there with it. You know, it wasn't like the bees were ignoring it. They were up in the hole, I think, trying to work on it. So I made sure that the bucket feeders stayed on the new queens. So just to make sure they have every chance at being accepted, I hope. So we'll see what happens.
Awesome. I love that. As we're talking about feeding, Miss Donna Wallace from Wallace Beehive says she's feeding bees while she listens. So that's awesome. Yeah, I love that about even early in the season, it's not quite as necessary, but we'll talk a little bit later on in tonight's chat about late season splits, queen acceptance, tips and tricks as far as feeding and nutrition in these queens. These things are super important, and a lot of folks aren't really in a mindset of making late season splits because maybe they don't have a goal or a need to. But for those who are maybe chasing growth or getting yards filled back in, if you sell nukes and things, you're trying to get those numbers built back up, and there's a certain way that we can go about doing that to make sure that those splits are as successful as possible this late in the year. We all know you get going the first part of the year, you can nearly do no wrong. Later in the season, everything changes, and it requires some different tools from the toolbox. And Bruce has alluded to some of those already. We're in a similar situation, Bruce, here. We'll talk more about this sort of secret project that we're working on, and we've got some folks all across the country involved in it to try to get some honest feedback. So it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of dig into a lot more of that, because you're not hearing a bunch of information about this at all. And so it'll be neat to kind of just looking for honest feedback on this. So that's going to be exciting. More details to come, and I'll have a video coming out here shortly that will kind of be the primer to, I think, some of that conversation. But like we mentioned earlier, Bruce, up here in Ohio, it is fall it feels hot, it feels nasty and sweaty and just full on dog days of summer, and it is. But we have been blessed with enough precipitation throughout the summertime to where these golden the goldenrod, the ironweed, and now the asters, they have been blessed with enough ground moisture, enough precip where they are actually going into the bloom mode. The plants are looking healthy and strong and beautiful. And so we're just anxiously awaiting to see will some of these perennials actually provide some flow this year? If they do, it could really mean a bumper fall crop like we've never seen before or for many, many years. And for those who are making these late season splits, we're just hoping and praying that it happens, because it really just helps these late season splits just take off in a big, big way. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Tonight's chat, it's all about August beekeeping tips and tricks. We're going to get into the thick of that here before too much longer. But Bruce, there's some exciting news up here in the Appalachian Belt area. There are a group of folks who are really doing some awesome things with beekeeping, bringing tremendous speakers and learning opportunities to the West Virginia area. I love what they're doing. I love what they're about. But a lot of folks, you know, they can't travel all across the country to get to some of these big named conferences. But there is a group of folks who are really digging in and doing the work to help bring that sense of community, fellowship, fun, and education to the great state of West Virginia. So tonight, I'd like to bring on the one and only Mr. Mike Lamp and Miss Louisa Householder. Folks, welcome to the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat.
Hi, guys. Hey, Greg, Bruce. Thank you for having us on.
Absolutely. Mike is with the newbies and also the West Virginia beekeepers, and helps kind of spearhead and make a lot of those things happen. But I think Mike has said the brains of the outfit, the boss behind it all, is Miss Louisa Householder. Louisa, could you unclick your microphone there and just kind of introduce yourself to our audience?
Hey there, my name is Louisa Householder, and I'm the president of the West Virginia Beekeepers Association. So I do head up the association, but on this time, Mike is it for this show. He is full of energy and so excited, and has been working his fingers to the bone. We text on a constant basis throughout the day. So we are super excited about the West Virginia Bee Fair, and it's the first of its kind here in the state. And we hope to draw folks from all over our region, including, our neighboring states. So we welcome everyone.
We're really excited about that. You guys have such a super neat lineup. Mike, could you talk to us a little bit about your involvement with the West Virginia Bee Fair? It's happening this September 12th and 13th in Lewisburg, West Virginia. Can you kind of fill us in on some of those exciting details?
Sure. I'll start by saying hi to some of you folks that may know me. I'm a newbie. I am out here on social media playing around as well. And in my personal life, I like to be an advocate for things here in my home state. Think global, act local, right? A part of that is acting very actively within my beekeeping organization. So I'm an active member of the West Virginia Beekeepers Association. I'm currently the president of the Mon County Beekeepers Association, which is kind of how I got started working with Louisa doing these conferences a few years ago. Every state that has beekeeping organizations knows that they tend to have a conference season at different parts of the year, normally one in the spring, one in the fall. And the past few years here in West Virginia, our event season has been growing. We've been putting a lot of energy into these events, and I personally have a lot of fun doing them. This event was an exciting one for me to be able to put on because we wanted to do something different. It's a fall event. Fall conferences don't always get the love that the spring events do. And so we wanted to try to bring some energy and bring some excitement to the fall, but also bring some education and bring some knowledge to folks here in West Virginia. This is the time when folks are looking at buying new things for the spring. We're looking at all the things that we did throughout the year and trying to figure out what we're going to do new next year. We're harvesting honey. There's so many things happening right now. So we're kind of making those lists that we somehow forget about until spring, right? And so what I've done is, or what we've done, what Louisa and I and the rest of our beekeeping crew have done, is we've put together the West Virginia Bee Fair. It's September 12th and 13th here in Lewisburg, West Virginia. It's actually on our state fairgrounds in West Virginia here. A beautiful area that is completely perfectly outfitted for this type of event. We have 2 full days of youth programming specifically for kids. We love our BIT program, Beekeeper in Training. We have a full fair of activities. We're going to have lots of standalone booths where folks can walk through, and we have a treatment yard where folks can learn about different sorts of treatments. We have a microscopy area where folks will be able to get some hands-on microscope experience and see bees a little bit closer up. And I believe we're going to have an extraction zone where we're learning about extracting honey and all things extracting. You can see, as Greg has pulled up there, our fall flow, which is our conference flow, if you will. And it is 2 full days of fun. And actually, there's a pre-event special. If anybody is familiar with the Appalachian Beekeeping Collective, they are hosting a facility tour, which is in Hinton, West Virginia. It's very close to where the event is, the day before. They're a huge organization. If you don't know who they are, you should check them out. We're very excited to have them a part of our event here in West Virginia. One of my favorite things about the Bee Fair is that we're going to also have in-hive experiences. That's not something that we get to do a lot at conferences. One, because the big ones all happen at the beginning of the year when it's cold. And how do you learn in hives if you don't get to get in them, right? So we kind of poised this event so that we could also have some in-hive education as well, learning from great educators from all over the area about topics from beginning beekeeping through queen spotting, through oxalic acid dribble treatments and some other different things.
That's really exciting. I love what you guys have put together as far as it's just like you mentioned, there are some great conferences all across the country. But what they're not able to do is kind of offer the let's get into the hives and let's look together kind of a thing. And I love that it's that time of year in this part of the country where you totally can, and folks are still excited about equipment and supplies. And like you mentioned, they're trying to get their entire season kind of, it's percolating, and all the things that, as it start to think, I wish I would have done this, or what was a lost opportunity? What was a great opportunity? What can we do better for next year? And so it's a great time, I think, why the beekeeping season is still fresh on everyone's mind, to fellowship with each other, ask each other questions, learn from some great speakers, take advantage of some great conference pricing, have some fun with the presentations, with the in the hive training. And what I really like what you guys have done, I think it's really neat that you've kind of incorporated the learning pods with the microscopy, with the different elements of beekeeping, like treating. What do those things look like? And we're excited to collaborate with you guys to bring an extraction line, bring that equipment to this bee fair, so folks can kind of see these pieces of equipment and how they fit together, and where there are some great opportunities for them to piece together some of the best equipment on the market. But most importantly, ask those questions, get their hands on, and be able to see, touch, feel, and ask questions from those who actually use this stuff on a regular basis. That is so important. And so I'm really looking forward to this very diverse, very fun learning opportunity. And if my better half, the brains, the beauty, if she was here, one of the things that she absolutely loves about what you guys are doing is your focus on the kids. And I think that is such an important thing. There's a great old quote, an ancient quote, that a society grows great when old men plant trees under the shade they know they'll never sit under. All these little things are so important because we don't know who we're shaping for the future. Just by grandpa bringing them to a bee conference, or mom and dad bringing them to a bee conference, getting the opportunity to see all these different things, you just never know how that can really shape not just the future beekeepers, but future humans. And I love that you guys have done such a great job incorporating not just all the education pods, but kids and learning opportunities for them. So thank you for doing that.
That's one of the most fun parts for me, I think, was being able to incorporate all of the youth activities. If you guys are familiar with Being Apis, he's a beekeeping cartoonist. If you're not familiar with the name, I'm sure you've seen his art. But he's going to be at the conference. He's actually our keynote for the kids to do some art with them. And we have some pollinator-centric and some beekeeping-centric activities specifically for the kids that are completely curated to give them 2 days of fun and also 2 days of education so that they can enjoy the conference the same way that everybody else does. A lot of these events in the past have always felt like you couldn't bring your kids, or like you had to find something else to do. And we don't want that at the Bee Fair. We want everyone to be welcome, because we want everyone to spend time enjoying time with each other. I think something when we talked the other day, Greg, that I mentioned was I wanted everyone to leave with a sense of family, or a sense of gaining something. You know, it's an experience, and that's what I want it to feel like. And I think that Louisa and I and the rest of our team have worked really hard to put that together. And we hope that when you all get to arrive and see what we've done, you enjoy it.
Absolutely. We're biased. We'll be right up front and say that, you know, we hail from this local Rust Belt, the foothills of the Appalachians here. So our culture, our sense of family, is maybe a little bit different than other parts in the country, but at the same time, it's the same common thread. I am biased when I say this, but the folks from West Virginia are some of the finest folks that we have ever been blessed with the opportunity of calling family and friends to this day. Our kids, when we all came out and were a part of the Honey in the Hills conference in West Virginia several years ago, to this day, out of all the places that we have taken, there you go, representing, that's right. Out of all the places that we have taken the kids and been a part of, there was something special there. And what was special is the people. And that's what I love, that West Virginia is going to have a bee fair held at a tremendous location in Lewisburg at the state fairgrounds. I mean, how cool is that? I'm looking forward to bringing the kids and having the kids be a part of this too. And I know that it's going to be another one of those feathers in their cap that they will always look back and cherish.
That's awesome. We are excited to be a part of it, and we're excited to have you guys a part of it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, Miss Louisa, what is one thing that you are really, really excited about for the West Virginia Bee Fair?
The honey show. We really, we're part of the American Honey Show Judges Training Council now, and we are finally getting footed in that with certified judges. So that's one of the things I'm getting excited about. I'll be working with those folks, you know, during this event. But the excitement of the whole thing, just the different, I'm hoping for a different feel, and I think we're going to see that with new things like the static displays and yeah, I just can't wait to see it all come together.
Awesome. Mike, what is one thing that you are just really, really excited about?
The people. I'm so excited to see everybody together. These events tend to be some of the most energizing weekends of the year, which is why I enjoy helping put them together. It takes
it's like having a family reunion.
It is. It really is. Beekeepers are an interesting folk, but we're all interesting together, and we love it. And I couldn't ask for a better bee family than the folks that come to these events. So I'm just excited to see everybody and to see them enjoy and learn together.
That's awesome. I know we are super excited about it. We're excited to have a nice, big, beautiful booth where we're going to bring the lights, the camera, the action. We're going to be meeting with beekeepers, doing our, on the spot interviews, and are really excited about the opportunity to kind of bring in something that we're really, really passionate about, which is American-made honey equipment right into West Virginia, so folks can see this equipment hands-on, put their hands on it, see it, touch it, feel it, ask questions from folks who actually use it. I'm really, really excited about that too. If folks want more information, you can register now at www.wvbeekeepers.org/beefair. We'll drop some links in this video once it actually posts too, but we're looking forward to it. And I'm also looking forward to seeing you guys all there. Mike and Louisa, before you go, this is the stream team beekeeping chat. So we can't just have you on and have you kind of just jump off here all of a sudden. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Ladies first, though. That'll give Mike a minute or two to think of a good answer, Louisa. So, Louisa, I'm going to ask you right now, in your neck of the woods in West Virginia, when it comes to your bees, right now, what is the single most important thing that you are focused on right now with your beekeeping?
I'm actually putting treatments on right now. I'm a little bit late, but that's what I'm doing. I'm checking for stores. I had a rough spring, so but I think what you said about having a good fall flow, I think it's coming. So I'm prepping for that.
All right, that's great. All right, Mike, I gave you a minute or so to think of a good answer.
No, I was ready. I was going to be upset if I had to leave the stream team chat and didn't get to talk about my bees.
Let's hear it.
So I've knock on wood had a very fortunate year with our bees. We had loss like everybody else did, but we've been able to bounce back really, really well. Our bees are doing great right now, and right now I'm looking at colony weight. The biggest thing for me is how much honey do my bees have? Do they have enough to make it through the winter, or do I need to be feeding heavily? You know, it's very important to be in tune with that, I think, at this point in the year, because you don't know necessarily what our fall is going to bring, especially in this neck of the woods. Sometimes we get a great flow, sometimes we don't. So right now I'm preparing. I'm making sure those colonies are making weight.
All right, that's huge. That's a big deal. Bruce, that gave me and you a couple more minutes to think about what we're going to talk about the rest of the night. So, Mr. Louisa and Mr. Mike, hey, really appreciate what you guys are doing, not just for West Virginia, but for this community at large. We really appreciate what you guys have done, stepping up, putting all this tremendous work into the West Virginia Bee Fair. For now, Mike, where can folks find more about the West Virginia Bee Fair?
Yes. Before I say anything about that, I saw Marianne Sears in the chat. Marianne and Larry are fan favorites, and we love them. They're great friends of ours, and they will be at the Bee Fair. So y'all should come see them as well, because it wouldn't be a West Virginia event without Marianne, and definitely without Larry.
Absolutely. I'll second that motion.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm excited that they're on the chat here. You can find out more about the West Virginia Bee Fair on our Facebook page or on our Facebook group. The West Virginia Beekeepers Association has an official Facebook page and group. Both are open to the public. You can also find out information on our website, wvbeekeepers.org/beefair. You can register there. You can check out our speakers, our great vendors, our full lineup, just about everything we've got going on. You can find on our website. And feel free to drop us questions. You can always DM us on Facebook or any of the social medias. We're pretty quick to respond. We want this to be a fun event for everybody, so we're happy to take questions and learn with folks as we're growing this event.
Awesome. Well, Mike and Louisa, I can't say it enough. We are pumped up to be vendors there, to be speaking on queen rearing the easy way. Can't wait to see you guys there and all the fine folks from West Virginia. So thanks for jumping on with us tonight.
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming.
Good night.
All right, guys. More August beekeeping chat right after this. Hey, are you looking for honey processing equipment that's built to last a lifetime and actually built in the USA? Are you looking for the very best and wax-dipped equipment? Or maybe the beefiest wooden frames and foundation on the market? Check us out at naturesimagefarm.com and let's make Made in America great again. All right, Bruce, it's August. I don't think you can kick the can any further down the road if you've not got your bees squared away for the winter time. Is it too late?
Gotta get on it. I mean, I think we have a little more flexibility down here than you guys do up there, but yeah, it's time. It's been time. Honestly, when my honey supers come off, that treatments go on, and I'm starting to prepare for next year in late June, early July. That's when I get going on it. But Yeah, it's in some ways it's somewhat hands off here if you get the treatments on, if you kind of check them if they still look strong, but still you got to make sure, you're cracking the lids occasionally, peeking in. And had I not made some summer splits, I wouldn't have been in them near as much as I have been. But I do peek in on them. I've been, checking them, kind of spot checking them, uh, cleaning out around the hives. We've got growth around a lot of the hives. I've been kind of weed eating and applying things around the hives to keep the foliage and stuff down, and bush hogged around some of them where you couldn't even see the hives anymore. So that's the kind of stuff I've been doing. But yeah, it's time. You got to make sure. I think that both of those guys made a great points as far as just the need to be, treatments and make sure they got the food they need, the weight they need, the resources to be able to make strong winter bees moving into winter.
Yeah, I think we have a habit sometimes as we're gaining experience to just pushing off making some tough calls or pushing off making choosing which direction that we're going to go with our bees when it gets this late in the year. Because on one hand, it feels like, oh, if I make a move and it's too big and the bees don't reciprocate, like if we're adding an entire box with 10 fresh frames, are they going to fill it out? Do they need it? Are they going to do anything with it? If I've got boxes that are or hives that are real heavy and real thick, can I split them still in time? And every one of those questions is just riddled with nuance that what may be appropriate in Alabama may not work for us here in Ohio, and might not come close to working somewhere up like, let's say, Fargo. So
Yeah,
you got to ask yourself, where are you in your season? How many days left do you have? And where do your bees need to be at that cutoff point? We're coming close to a cutoff point to where that's it. That's all, folks.
Yeah, like I say, it's pretty forgiving down here. Our biggest issues down here, honestly, are the pests. We have of course, mites are everywhere. We have the hive beetles that we got to stay on top of. Colony strength, managing space, those are so important here because if you get a hive that seems like they're kind of weak or just kind of if there's too much space in the colonies, then that's just room for the pests to go out of control, especially hive beetles and things like that can get in there and wreak havoc. People I've heard people say, and I that wax moths took out their hive, and wax moths, in my opinion, don't kill beehives. Wax moths are 100% opportunist. You've got a double deep, and the bees are only in a small cluster in the center of the top. The second box. Wax moths are going to get in the bottom box, or vice versa. They'll get in there, and they'll destroy the comb. But the wax moths aren't what are destroying the colony. It's the weak colony or the excess space where the bees can't defend it. Because if you've got a good strong colony, you'll never see a wax moth in there. If you do, they aren't in there for long. And the bees take care of it. And it's a similar thing with beetles, although beetles are a little more sneaky and they do actually coexist with the bees more. You do see beetles in strong colonies, but when beetles become a problem is when they just overrun. If the bees can't keep them corralled, if the colony starts to get weak and there's a excess of beetles and they can't keep them corralled, then they'll create problems as well. So really, typically, those two particular pests are opportunists when hives get weak or sick. As far as the mites go, we all know the story with the mites. I mean, mites are going to be in your beehives typically. Although I did see someone in here talking about how, tell me what's wrong with my testing. I'm not seeing. I'm getting zeros. I'm like, well, I think that sounds pretty darn good. If you're doing the test right and you're getting all zeros, that's what you want to see. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. So that's what we all hope to see. But mites is something that each of us has a little different approach typically, and it does vary a little bit depending on where you live. But space is really important as well, and I do have some that are probably have a little too much space. But it's funny when I pull the supers off. Mine are stacked pretty high usually in May and June when the honey flow is going. Some of them are 6-7 boxes deep, including the brood, and they just are tall towers, and they've got bees bearding on them even when they're stacked high like that. And you pull all those boxes of honey off, and the entire hive is covered in bees on the outside. It's just like you can't even hardly see the boxes because of all the bees. And you think, oh my gosh, they're going to swarm. And typically that's not what happens. I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially a lot of beginner beekeepers. And I didn't really realize this until recent years, that when you do that, you're actually giving that colony a better chance to survive, I believe, if you just condense the space down. Many of those bees are foragers, and they're going to die off fairly soon anyway. And they typically don't swarm in that mode, especially if you're going into any kind of a dearth. They're not going to swarm on you. And so I have had very, very few summer swarms, even when I condense them down and cram the bees all into a couple of boxes. And now you go out there and there's very little bearding going on in these same colonies that were just covered in bees 2 months ago, because they backed off on young bee production, and they've got brood in there. They've got some brood, they've got food, they've got the resources they need, but they're not wall to wall brood like they were, in April, May. They're not like that anymore, because they've just scaled back. They know what's coming. It's been hot and humid, not much coming in. I think there's been a little trickle coming in. I don't think we've really had 100%. Maybe a couple of my yards have a little bit, but they really haven't just plowed through their stores or anything like they sometimes do. There's something been coming in. Now the cotton around is blooming, and there's some things starting to bloom a little bit that get us through this time of year. I know cotton doesn't always produce honey, but it does produce, at least around here, is producing at least, something's coming in enough to keep them happy. I mentioned earlier where I put some of your buckets on my hives, and they're not consuming much of it. They're in it, they're interested in it, but they're not just sucking it down. So there must be something coming in that's keeping them somewhat happy. They're not working really hard, but they are working, if that makes sense. They're not all hanging out on the outside of the hives, but they're not just in a frenzy like they are going and getting. It's not like it's a major highway back and forth going and collecting nectar. There's not a big source of anything coming in, but they're doing okay, at least the ones I've checked on the last few weeks.
Yeah, those are some great observations. I see that too. And sometimes like tonight, before I got in here and got everything turned on, I just cruised through the farmyard here. And here in the farmyard, there's maybe, I don't know, 140, 150-ish colonies. And so just kind of driving through the 4-way rows, and now that we've got this heat back, and after it's rained today and then the sun comes out, it's, as you can imagine, it's nearly a sauna. And so those bees are kind of gathering on the front. And even on those warm days when it's just hot, you see all these bees on the front this late in the year, and you have a knee-jerk reaction to say, oh my gosh, I need to get in there and make sure they're not swarming. And then you start to get into the hive and take it apart, and it's like, well, there's not a lot going on inside of the boxes necessarily. They're on the outside. They're kind of, they're working on their suntans. But what is an interesting dynamic is there's a couple things that I try not to do at all, and it's just purely novice for me to do, and I've done it, and this is why I don't do it anymore. If I leave colonies that I've split out into 5-frame nuke boxes, if I just stack up those 5-framers and it's still this late in the year and they're still in 5-frame boxes, those knuckleheads have a tendency of still wanting to swarm late in the year. If it's a 5/5, or if it's 3, God forbid, 3 of those things stacked up, in those configurations, it's as though they get choked out so bad on space because maybe of the overall capacity, volume of that configuration, they can still swarm late in the year. But if I were to take those same number of frames and put those into 10-frame equipment, it's like you couldn't even ask. They won't even, you can't hardly even force them to swarm out of there. There are some dynamics that tend to change as we get later in the season. And there are some nuances to that I don't think we can fully understand and recognize. But once we do get past the solstice, it seems as though that swarming urge starts to very quickly drop off, unless you've got them crowded and just jammed up into 5-frame equipment. This time of year, I'm not even worried about swarming anymore. Specifically because we've got, we have fresh queens in a lot of these colonies. But what I've noticed, there's a dynamic that I don't think that I can put into words quite enough to fully understand. But what I see is we can take the same bee yard and we can take fresher queens that are, let's say, late May, late June, even late July queens that are in boxes that are built up, and let's say that they're in doubles with a honey super on top, and the bees are just spilling out on front, and they're loaded full of bees. Those colonies, this time of year, they just, if they're overpopulated, they seem to just want to evacuate the colony and just hang out on the outside some. But what I'm seeing, the difference is, if I've got last year queens, same configuration, they're a little bit more fickle. For whatever reason, there is this undefined dynamic between the age of the queen and what I'm seeing in the response that of the colony with the older queen in similar situations. I'm sure somewhere there is some kind of study on that, on communication and exchange and where these bees think that they're at. But I do see a tremendous difference with much fresher queens and that swarming response in that same year. Just a lot of that risk is just, the fire is just put out of it. But those older queens in the same configuration with the same population are a little bit more fickle when it comes into this late of a season. And I have seen those older queens swarm late in the year. And that is just, it can be extremely frustrating. But it's interesting to start to dial in when you start to observe just some little nuances. It's hard to explain. It's hard to understand why. I just don't wonder sometimes if we get into, there's a lot of factors. But anyways, at this time of year, Bruce, are you really even concerned with much swarming at all in your neck of the woods?
I see an occasional swarm, but I don't even worry about it. It's probably been 3 or 4 weeks ago now. I was at the Midland City Beeyard, and there was a swarm I caught earlier in the year that had just kind of either was absconded or died out. That's kind of become one of my what's the word I'm trying to use? One of my kind of holding yards for swarms. I just kind of put them all there this year. I do have some other bees there, but that's kind of where I took them all instead of mixing them in with all my stuff. And one of the swarms had died out in a little nuke box, and it was just sitting there. Well, I went over. When I pulled up, I saw the swarm hanging in the tree. It was a reasonable sized swarm, but it was kind of, I don't know, a little bit agitated. You know, sometimes swarms just hang there all calm and gentle. Sometimes they're more agitated. They're kind of running around. They're kind of not real happy. Almost like, I'm not sure, you would think they're about to fly away, but they aren't. They're just kind of hanging out there. And so I went over and kind of tried to catch them. They were reachable. Anyway, I don't put a lot of stock in late season swarms. And obviously I'm sure they were one of my colonies. I don't know where they came from, but there were some bees checking out. I put a swarm commander in that little nuke, and I saw some bees checking out anyway, because there was comb in there, you know, from that other swarm that had been in there. And I just left, and I came back, and now last time I was out there was a little swarm in there. So I think they probably moved in there, because there were some bees checking out that box almost immediately, and I think they were about to move in there anyway. Possibly that might be why they were a bit agitated and running around. It's very rare to find a swarm this time of the year, and they don't usually do well. If I catch them, I guess I've had some that have done okay, but if I catch them and they abscond, fine. If they don't abscond, fine. And every once in a while, one will do okay. But you don't get the swarm calls. You don't see near as many swarms. Very rare to see a swarm this time of year, but it does happen occasionally. I don't know why it happens. Sometimes it might be an abscond if you've got a hive beetle issue or a pest problem, you know, or an issue like that. It could be an abscond. You think it's a swarm, but it's really an abscond. But most of the time, and sometimes they're kind of weak and wimpy, small little swarms as well. They might be just a tiny little swarm. I'm not sure why they do it. I do know that I kind of agree with some of the stuff you were saying about the older queens, though, Greg. This year, I've become more in tune with, you know, I just think having younger queens in your operation really is an advantage, honestly. I've always felt that way since Kama started introducing that idea to me, probably 5 years ago, maybe. Started talking to him a little bit, and he's like, great queens, dead mites, proper nutrition. And then we talked about, and I kind of interpreted that as young queens. Well, if you got 140, 150 colonies or whatever, it's hard, unless you're making your own queens like you are, Greg. It's hard anyway, probably, but to just replace all your queens every year, I just really can't do that. But what I found is bringing in queens from from quality queen breeders, and I know that one of these days I'll make my own queens, but it's just easier to do that. And I noticed like 2 years ago is when I got my first queens from Zach Heinzelman in Hawaii, and I really tried to take care of them, do everything right. And last year they did great. They did get great this year, but now some of those queens are starting to get old and starting to fade. You know, they're probably a year and a half to 2 years old. They're getting that older age range. And so I've replaced a lot of those, and I'm starting to replace those. If I go in and I see a hive that's a little bit weak, if I find the queen, lots of times she's got a green dot on her, whether it's his or one of mine or whoever's they came from. You got a green dot on them from 2 years ago, or from, I guess, is that 2 years ago or last year, whatever year it was. And they've been through as many bees as those queens have laid, as many eggs as they've laid, you know, as huge as those colonies are. I think they just start to kind of fizzle out. I think they just kind of start to peter out, you know, and it's time to, and if you can replace them, especially this time of the year, Greg, I think, you know, they'll come into spring just roaring. If you can get them through the tough time of fall and through the winter, keep them strong, keep them built up, man, they just hit the ground running in spring, and they just do so good. And that's what I experienced last year and this year when I did that. So kind of trying to replace them, you know, kind of trying to identify colonies, even if I'm splitting them and the colony is fairly strong, but I start to see a spotty brood pattern in there. You know, if I split them, there's a lot of bees. Even if the old queen does kind of fizzle out, I may get another year out of her, but even if she does fizzle out, I've still got another colony to replace it with, if that makes sense. So I'm always kind of trying to replace them. And I figure this year I've ordered, let's see, pushing probably a little bit more than 100 queens throughout the year, which is almost enough to replace my entire operation when it boils down to it. Not quite, but close. Plus, I'm sure some of my bees actually requeen themselves. They do it every year. I'm sure I missed some swarms early in the season, and I'm sure some supersede. So overall, I'm trying to lower the average age of queens in my operation. I think it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. It's a real challenge unless you are making your own queens, or if you have enough of a harvest with what you do as a beekeeper that you can justify, you know, purchasing and bringing in queens all at once. But gosh, you know, going back years and years and years ago, I think the first successful beekeeper that I really had heard about requeening every year religiously it has to be Bob Benny. You know, for somebody operating with a couple hundred colonies, like that's definitely an expense and an undertaking. Whether you're buying queens or making queens, when you're operating at Bob's scale, when somebody is operating with 1,500 to 3,000 colonies, and they say it's imperative that they requeen every single year, I think you've really got to take notice, and you've really got to understand, okay, if it's that important for someone to do, that is a significant undertaking. Why are they doing that? And then what is the ROI? And I think Bob's been very clear on why he feels as though that is so important for them to do in their operation. It's one thing when you hear somebody say that, and then as beekeepers, we have a habit, either good or poor, at just recycling and regurgitating the same things that we hear somebody else saying all the time. And sometimes those things might not be fact. When Bob says there is a big benefit on requeening every single year, when you try that, when you start to implement that, you really do start to see the fruit of that labor. And one of the big things, one of the huge blessings with that, one of the great returns on that investment is when you get later in the year, like we are right now. I've got 99 bee problems, but swarming ain't one. And that's a big deal. You know what I mean? I think a lot of folks are going to start seeing the importance of that. And then when you do get your operation up to a certain size, you know, once you break past the 50 to 75, the 100, you really start to see a difference in overall percentages gains of each asset, each unit, which is the colony. if you are gaining a 8 to a 10% gain in production per colony, I mean, if you've got 10 colonies, what does that mean? That might not be enough to justify making moves. But when you get into 50, 75, or 100 colonies, and they're either making 10% more brood or 10% more honey, like that's huge. And for a lot of folks, especially when it comes to farming, that can sometimes make or break if you're in the red or if you're in the black. So I think it's something for folks to consider and to think about freshening up your queens, not because the queen can't lay for 3 years, not because she's going to be dead in 3 years, but because you can etch out another 10% in production by doing so. It doesn't mean that you can't have a backup plan for those queens. If you want to move those off into 5-frame nukes and have a little battery of backup queens and colonies, or if you have folks who are interested in older overwintered colonies or nukes, for whatever reason, there's still value to those for sure. But as far as high production, boy, just what a blessing it is to have those young queens, which is why we've gone to the effort. Sounds like, Bruce, you're doing the same thing. What's fun about what you sharing your experience, Bruce, is you've tried queens from us, queens from Randy Oliver, queens from Lappy's, queens from
a lot of places.
Zach, the list goes on and on. But as you've tried to incorporate different queen lines, you've also started to refine how you go about making the splits. To make sure that you can get the highest amount of queen acceptance. Let's talk about that here a little bit, Bruce. Late season splits. You just made your splits about probably the last of your splits, maybe a week ago?
Well, it was this past weekend, yeah.
Okay. Talk to us about Dothan, Alabama. This is probably going to be the last of the splits that you make?
As far as my plans are now, yeah.
Okay. So talk us through it. So let's just hypothetically say, early to mid-August is Bruce's current cutoff point for making these splits. Bruce, talk to us about your train of thought logistically and fundamentally what that looks like as you are looking at a colony and determining, can this be split? And then if so, what is the execution there? What is the number of boxes, the number of frames, the equipment? What does that look like for you?
I think what I need to do is go back and start a little bit with things that haven't worked, so people know kind of what to look out for, because I've done a lot of that. 2 years ago, actually, I had just a bee yard up in Ozark, and for those who remember that bee yard, those bees, I've had some really feisty and mean bees over the years, but that yard was just kind of out of control completely. And there were a few nice ones there, but they were just smothered out by all the feisty ones up there. And I see Grammy in here, Lisa's in here, and they ran her out of the bee yard a couple of times, and some other people have really had. So I just got, that's really kind of when I just, even the year or two before that, Greg, you came down and experienced, you and Mike Berry were here, experienced that bee yard and how just crazy they were. And I don't care what time of the year it is, even if it's the time of the year when they're typically a little more spicy, when they're just absolutely mean and just ridiculous, no matter even if it is the worst time of the year, and it's a consistent thing, like week after week, it's time to do something about it. So I decided to calm them down. I actually talked to Cayman about this, and he hooked me up with Michael Palmer, and I got some queens from him, like 30, and I got some 30 queens from him, and I had probably about that many colonies up there. So I just went up there and I said, I don't care. I'm just going to break these things down. I moved, Bob Benny says if you move the main hive away from a spot, they do tend to calm down, because it's the foragers that typically are the ones that cause the feistiness. And I found that to be true. If you take the bottom box and you move it away, then that hive won't be mean for a while until they mature a little bit. So I was breaking them down, splitting them. I was making really just some heavy splits about this time of the year, first part of August. And then I put the queens in there. I tried introducing them with the queen introduction cages. You got the screens that you can use for that. Tried a new way of introducing the queens, and it was an utter failure. For whatever reason, it didn't go well. You sent me some queens down about a month later, I think it was, and I tried introducing some more. into that bee yard. And overall, I ended up with, I think at one time I had 53 colonies in that spot. And at the end of the winter, I had 6 or something like that, 6 or 7 colonies left there. The ones that were there were strong, but there weren't very many. And so I just learned that this time of the year, and I didn't feed them. I didn't feed them when I split them. I started feeding them in frame feeders immediately after. It was just, logistics. I couldn't do it. I didn't have the ability to do it. I ordered too many queens to get it all done. And I almost got overheated one day. That's one reason I was in such a hurry. On that Friday, I went up there and got overheated, and I just had to go up there the next day. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't get it done. And so they got hive beetles in them. I think they ended up with some issues with some gut health. I'm not sure if it was nosema. They did have some nosema, but it wasn't the levels that you would expect it to be really bad. They just were not healthy, and lost a bunch of them. So last year, I did a little bit differently. I got some queens from Zach in July, and I was more careful. I fed them. What I did last year is I put them in July in nuke boxes. I put 3 strong frames in a nuke box with a feeder, which is not much. That's not enough bees really. And I had decent success with that, but I lost some of them. I think they just weren't strong enough splits. And I just lost some of them. The ones that survived ended up making a lot of honey this year, and they were super healthy and did great. Those were some of my best colonies this year, but I did lose some of those. This year, I actually went up another notch, Greg, and we talked about this. I made the ones I got from Zach in July. Those were used in a lot of cases to replace weak queens in certain areas, other bee yards up in Midland City and the far Newton up there by the cell tower. But the ones I got from you, I went down to Applin and Slocum, and I just got in. I went and made sure we did full 10 frame splits. And you sent me the buckets. I went ahead and fed them a week ahead of time. I determined last weekend, 10 days ago or whenever it was, I determined which colonies I wanted to split. Went down and looked through the colonies to see which ones looked like I could split them, needed to be split, or which queens I needed to replace. And then I went ahead and put a bucket of syrup on there, thick syrup, corn syrup, full strength. I didn't water it down at all. And the idea behind that is, I guess it just kind of calms them down, gets them happy, even though they didn't bring a lot, they didn't eat a lot of it, but that's the theory. Then I went down Friday, did everything Friday. Your queens came in Friday morning. I went down and went ahead and I did the queen I mentioned earlier in the chat before a lot of people were on here. I basically tried to make sure there were resources on the top box and the bottom box. Shook all the bees, make sure the queen was below an excluder. And since there's brood above the excluder, theoretically the bees work their way back up through the excluder, and you got bees in both boxes. And if you leave them like 2 or 3 hours, really is plenty of time for that, I've found over the years. And so I went to Slocum first, did that. Went to Applin, the ones I identified, did it there. Then went back to Slocum, made the splits, placed the queens, did the same thing at Applin. It took me all day to do it. But your queens were beautiful, and we'll see what happens. So, and then I once again, they had not consumed all the food, but I left the bucket with the food on it, on top of the new queen, wherever she was. If I dropped one other strategy I used was I did move the original queen away, like I moved her on a pallet away. So, because typically more of the bees in the bottom box this time of year, and these boxes are packed out with bees, more seem to be in the bottom. And so I moved that bottom box away, dropped the queen down below, I moved the queen away, dropped the top box down below that was queenless, and then put the new queen in there with the food. Theoretically, the foragers fly back from some of the foragers will fly back, populate that box even more, and then the queen won't even miss a beat that you move away. And so that's what I did. So we'll see how it works out. I think it's going to work out fine. But the main thing I learned is they need to be strong splits this time of the year, I believe. Last year, like I say, some of those smaller splits did okay, but some of them didn't. They just ended up not being strong enough. And but I did have a pretty good percentage that ended up making it through and doing just fine. So that's kind of how I did it down here. That's what I did. And so we'll see how they do. I think they're going to do great. Still need to check on some of those from Zach. I haven't checked on yet. Checked on a few of them. They were doing fine. And I will need to check on yours too pretty soon, Greg, and see if they got released and how they're doing.
Yeah, I like that. That's some of the things that we've learned over the years. We try to make sure that we incorporate, and it does look similar throughout the year. We can get by with a whole lot less at the beginning of the year. Bruce, when you mentioned that you pulled brood up into another box, where you shook the brood frames off under an excluder, how much time went by from the time that you are shaking the bees off the frames into the bottom box under the excluder? How much time has passed from the time that you've got the boxes split with an excluder before you move out the queen right box and then add in that new queen? How much time has passed?
It was probably 2 to 3 hours.
Okay.
I mean, more than that was fine. Now, I will say some of the colonies were set up perfectly, where they did have brood in the top box already, and they have brood in the bottom box. But on some of those, I had to move a little bit of food down below because the bottom box didn't have the food. They stored all up top, and so it was more just trying to equalize the boxes as much as possible. It's amazing to me how you'll have one colony in a bee yard that's got a second deep that has 8 frames of honey in them. Can hardly pick it up. And then the hive right next to it, it has a ton of bees in it, but there's no food hardly. You know what I mean? And so, or they have it perfectly mixed. You got 2 frames of food in both the top and the bottom, or 4 frames of food in the top and the bottom, and then everything's like kind of symmetrical throughout both boxes with a little bit of crown on the top. It's just weird how they just all do it differently, but it seems to work. But those are the ones I'm concerned about, are the ones that may not have had enough food, or maybe the population wasn't quite as good. There were 3 or 4 that I'm not really sure on, but I tried. It took me all day to do it, and I was getting pretty tired. But we'll see what happens. I think I think I've got them all set up so they could survive, or they'll survive. But a vast majority, almost all of them I think are going to, hopefully. You just never know, Greg. There are no absolutes, but hopefully I did everything in a way that it'll work out good, assuming I actually did get all the queens moved. You never, even if you shake the frames, you don't always know 100% if you get the queen off. When you're moving quick, you can't just look at every single frame over and over and over again until you find the queen. You got to just hope that when you shake them, all the bees come off. You look down, you see just a couple bees on the frame. You hope you got her off of there. So, but yeah, it was just 2 to 3 hours. It doesn't take them long. I used to think you had to leave them overnight, but you don't have to do that. And I will say too, in the spring, man, you can get by with, when there's a flow going, you can get by with just 2 or 3 frames, almost splits. You can just put them in, take a couple frames of brood, a frame of food, and 2 frames of foundation, stick them in a nuke and move them, and they'll make it. Drop a queen in there, and they'll make it during a flow. But this time of year, you have to be, if anything I've learned, you have to be a lot more careful this time of the year.
I love it when you go into the yard and you crack a lid and you've got the lids waxed to the top of the frames and there's a little honey in there, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're just really jamming. You go through it and they're just absolutely just jacked full of resources and full of bees. And then you go to some other colonies, either on the pallet or in their pallet next to it, and it's like a completely different timeline of what's going on. At first, it gets you really pumped up, and you have to not get your hopes up. That's what you're going to see in every single colony, every single pallet. When you get in there and see the ones, they're looking good, they're just not as far ahead. It's a great humbler and a reminder that everything, including us, the timeline, plan, and path that God's got for me in my life is different than Bruce's, and different from all the folks who are tuning in with us tonight. Same thing is going on with these bees too. Depending on when you introduced that queen, how big that they got, where were they at in the growth cycles when there was a little flow earlier? Were they susceptible to, they were really wanting to brood up, and it was perfect time to brood up in a big way, and we had rain for 7 days straight and then cold temps, and that just squashed the fire right out of them, and now they're slowly building right back up again. That colony where they're just jammed full of honey and nectar and pollen and everything, when you crack the lid, were those the ones that it was just perfect timing on every single step? They were not only did they brood up, but they had a mature field force just waiting and ready for the flow to hit, and they were operating at 100% potential, bringing in that crop, and they were grow. It's amazing to watch the different colonies on the life cycle of the honeybees, where they're actually at in each individual colony, and what that actually means for the resources that are inside of there. It sometimes you leave the bee yard thinking, am I even getting better as a beekeeper? Because I still can't
for
figure
sure.
all the things out. I still can't guess and get it right. And then you have to remind yourself, well, are the bees in the trees or are they in the boxes? If they're in the boxes, then we're winning. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing I've noticed, especially, and it's really Applin is laid out to where they're all in a long line, like the pallets are all facing in the same direction, almost like in a long line. And so I can kind of, it's easier to kind of remember what bees are where in that
Yeah.
particular bee yard. And so last year when I got the queens, the early splits I made in February with the Hawaiian queens, if you're looking at the bee yard from where I usually park my truck to the left side, kind of away from the actually farmhouse up there, that's where I did most of my splits last year that way on that part of the bee yard. And so a lot of the bees up in the other end of the bee yard, and they're about, I think there's 12 or 13 pallets. There are 13 pallets there now, maybe 12 last year, but the other end of the bee yard was mostly the queens that, you know, my typical queens, other queens, just my typical stock. And so that end of the bee yard was a little bit feisty, and they were productive, some of them, and those were older queens there, you know, because they were been there for longer. And so last year, the end of the bee yard with all the new queens, and even some of those down there were some of the queens I grafted myself, and most of them, some of the ones on both ends were, and they just absolutely blew it out last year and did great. And I made the splits early in the year. This year, you know, obviously those bees were still really strong, most of them, and they did really good. Some of those queens even from last year. But most of my requeening this year was on the opposite end of the bee yard. You know, the one that had been the older queens, so to speak, and some of the grafts I made were still there. Well, almost all the whole bee yard, and I know that Glade and Bracken were down there, and Jed, they saw it, and so they were all strong this year. But now what's happening is, what I'm seeing is the new queens that I put in early this year are just, they've exploded. They're still just strong, packed out double deeps, doing great. And the ones that last year were strong are now starting to fade. That's where a lot of the splits I made with your queens, Greg, are on that end. There's still bees in there, but the brood's getting a little spotty. Some of the queens seem to be failing. You know, there's just not the population there was even 2 months ago. And so those are the ones that now I've got to keep my eye on. You know, you walk in the bee yard, see bees flying everywhere, but then when you start cracking lids, you can see, you just get to where you can notice a definite difference. And, you know, I almost hate to just break apart super strong hives right now and just split them, because I'm like, man, they are set up so good for winter. In Slocum, the situations, most of the ones there were still really strong. There weren't a lot of weak ones there. So in that bee yard, I did pull some splits for real strong ones. I did a few strong ones at Applin as well, but you can just kind of get an idea. I'm starting to kind of zero in a little bit on the fact that, you know, just the queens, they go about a good solid year to a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then it's just kind of time to probably, yeah, I mean, like you said, Greg, they may still produce another year or two, but are they going to be at peak performance? And if you're treating them as units, if you're treating them as if it's a business for you, you know, you need to make sure they're at peak performance as much as you can. And I have lost a few that are just faded out before I could get to them and catch them and try to fix it and replace them. And so that's the other issue, Greg. I don't know what this might be this is a great time to talk about this. We could talk more about queens if you want, but I'm thinking maybe further in the chat, we could talk about what to do with equipment when you have a dead out in a bee yard. What do you do with your equipment? Like, say, for example, you got a double deep that is extremely weak, you know, or is basically faded out, it's getting robbed out, and that's basically history. What I typically do is when that happens, I just tip them up on their side, let the bees go ahead and rob them out, and then I have to deal with them later. Next time in the bee yard, I'll deal with those before the wax moths have a chance to get in and destroy that comb. I have to do something with them. How do you handle boxes like that, Greg? If you're in the bee yard and you find a couple of dead outs, the rest of your bees look strong, what do you do with that equipment that's got the comb in it that was in a nice strong colony and now it's died out or faded out, or you've decided to shake the bees out of it? What do you do with that comb and those resources?
Pretty much the same thing. You know, one thing that I hate to do is chase my tail. And I hate doing the same thing 2 or 3 or 4 times. So what I like to do is, as we're going through the yards, if there was a swarm and they failed to requeen, or there was a laying worker, or they're going downhill, or they just don't have it figured out, even if there is a handful of bees left in the box, I'll just take the box and turn it up on its side so that wind and sun can pass through it. And then as I'm going through the rest of the yard, if I see that I've got a colony they need room, I'll just start robbing from those resources. So what I actually do is kind of treat the bee yard as I kind of create little caches of equipment. I used to just keep them all in like big areas, and I still do to a certain extent, where I'll have a couple pallets where everything is kind of stacked up. But as you get through the rest of the season, you'll see something you don't like for all the various reasons, and that box will just get turned up on its side as I'm going through the rest of the colony. If I need an extra frame or two, or if I want to put in some drawn comb, or if I want to add a full box, or if I want to pull brood up and add some extra frames down below, I'll just start grabbing from that cache that's there within the bee yard. At some point, though, you don't have those little stashes in place, and then you got to pull from the truck, or if you brought boxes with you or something to do there. But that's what I do. Eventually, we are going to get to the point here in October where we're done. When we get to a certain point in October, we're done. There's not going to be any more growth. It's just going to be maintaining. Probably about the 1st of October on, it's going to be just maintaining. And then they're going to be shrinking in size. So if they're not using it by then, they're not going to. And so then we'll start stripping off equipment and getting things out of the way, reducing liability. We go into risk management mode. We're in risk management mode in the entire year, but the later we get, the greater that the risk is of wax moths and hive beetles. When it starts to get cold and things like that, in equipment stashes, it becomes mice and all these other things that kind of factor into that. But that's what I do, Bruce. I don't like to have it too far away from everything. I would prefer to have every space on a 4-way full, and that's what these last of the splits that we're making. That's exactly what we're doing. Even for splitting in the same yard, we're trying to fill out all of those 4-ways. So then when we do go to move them or put them in a wintering yard to do all the things, there's nothing worse than going after and spending the time with a skid steer to move one pallet that has one 10-frame single on it. I'm not doing that. And so we'll usually wait when it gets a little bit cooler and the bees are kind of clustered up a little bit more. We'll just start just stacking and slapping them down and get everything filled out, and then let them kind of figure it out. But that's what
that's my goal too now, is to get the pallet slots filled. I just hate going to a bee yard and seeing empty pallet slots. And
what is it about that?
I don't know. I just like them to be uniform and all be full. I'm like, I've got the resources. I've got the bottom boards right there with those pallets. I need to have bees in them. And, that's what happens is you lose some, and there are some that are empty slots, but I like to keep them all full. And that's what I've been doing. That's what I did with the queens that I got from you, Greg, mostly, is I just made splits and filled empty pallet slots where I've had some of these recent dead outs. And it's not like I'm losing all my bees, but there's just some attrition that happens, and it's just a few here or there. And, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now, is get those pallets. I would love to have every single pallet I have full of bees, but if I did that, I would have, probably pushing 200 colonies, maybe 180 colonies. I just really don't need that many colonies, but I can't stand going to a bee yard and seeing, especially if it's a pallet like with one hive on it and 3 empty slots, that just drives me crazy. I'm like, it just looks so ugly out there.
I can't tell if it's a beekeeper OCD thing, if it's from a asset management standpoint. Like, hey, there's a spot something could be producing and it's not. Like, how can we get that in? It feels, I love the feeling when you're cruising through your rows, either in the morning or the evening, and the light's just right and the bees are up flying, and you're cruising through and you see bees coming out of in and every box on all sides.
Oh, it's awesome, yeah.
But I love it.
I had a time this year where
spot's full.
I had a time this year where every slot in Slocum was full like that, and they were all healthy and growing and just stacked up and beautiful. And Applin was that way some of the year, but there was 1 or 2 slots here or there. But that, when you got 13 pallets and you're missing just 2 or 3 slots, it doesn't look that bad. But man, it just looks better. Yeah, like OCD for me. Yeah, I'm not an OCD person mostly, but that's just something I just want to see them full and want to see them all. I also like to have them all looking the same, especially this time of year, the same height, you know, and everything. Now, when a honey flow starts, they kind of just fill whatever I put on there. I kind of manage the space, you know, when the honey season is in, I have different heights, but man, this time of the year, I'd like them to all be the same height, but they're not. They're all, my goal is all deeps, double deeps or deep and mediums. And now with these splits I've made, I'm hoping some of these singles I made will grow up into some double deeps by the winter. I don't know if they will or not. I'm going to try and keep a little feed on them and stuff and see what they do, but we'll see. I just want them to survive and get through winter and just see how they do in the spring, Greg. I hope your queens do well. And frankly,
Yeah.
I've got to check on the queens. I haven't even checked on some of the queens I introduced almost a month ago. I just haven't had a chance to get some of those bee yards yet and see. I'm sure they got accepted. The few I checked, you know, had a pretty good acceptance rate, but I haven't been up to the Midland City or Cell Tower. I've just been so busy. It's just been hard. But I got my treatments in, which was my main goal. And then I was able to make those splits. And so we'll see. I don't know. I get to the point, there's so many more things I could do. But I'm trying to get to the point now to where the things I'm doing with the time I have are the most important things. And that's kind of, I think, part of the, you know, we talked to Bobby that night about the art of beekeeping. You know, I think that's part of the process is make sure that you do the most important things first, you know, things that are most critical. And then there's always something you can do. There's always something you can do with the bees, but make sure the most important things are what you focus on first. And then if you have some other things you need to do or can do, you can take care of those less crucial things at a later time. But anyway, can you believe we've already been going for an hour and 15 minutes?
And
It's
we
kinda
just,
crazy.
everything you say is just opening up a portal to another rabbit hole that we can never get to the bottom of all of the things that we'd like to say about it. But, you know, that's an important thing where we're at with August beekeeping is, you know, what is the size of the colony? Do they need more room? Do they need less room? What do you do with the equipment when you pull it off? Are the queens moving forward? Are they old queens? Are they new queens? What's the genetic line of the queen? Because there's so many things, you know, that's one thing we don't have time to talk about tonight. But, you know, if you take different hybrids of genetic lines, sometimes you can get 2 or 3 really solid years out of them. If you take kind of more of a straight run, more of a, you know, double 4-barrel carburetor hot rod of just a straight up Italian or Cordova, and they just want to just rocket to the moon, they're beautiful at that. They are amazing at that. But you might start to get into that second part of the first year or into that second year, and they're running on fumes. You know, they've done a great job, but genetic lines play a big difference in what you're seeing and what your goals are and which way to go. And it's an important thing to consider right now is what are your queens doing? If your queens don't look good right now, this might come as a news flash, but they're not going to look good in November.
For sure.
I know that sounds ridiculous, but if they don't look good right now, they're not going to snap out of it and magically get to be a high performing queen in December at one of the highest stress points in the season for them to produce. So it might be time to make some of those tough calls and decide, you know, which way you're going to go with that. The only thing I want to add to the splitting conversation tonight, Bruce, is you know, as you and I were talking about some of the things that you could potentially do to increase your take rates late in the year, you know, the feeding aspect is probably one of the most underutilized tool for late season queen acceptance. By getting that feed on a week ahead of time, even if they are just nibbling on it, there is something, for lack of better words, that satisfies and also boosts the morale of a colony when they know they have incoming. You know, we got to be careful anthropomorphizing, but it's like us. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or worse, it puts you into a stressed out mode of anxiety and in that scarcity mindset. But when you know your finances are squared away and you've got incoming revenue over the next X amount of time, like, you can relax about that and you can get to work and things just go better, it seems. Inside of the colony, that's why I love putting on straight syrup, thick syrup in a bucket on top, because if they really, really needed it, like needed it in a bad way, they will 100% go to that bucket and they will pull it out and they'll pull it quick. right? But if it's there and they're kind of borderline on the fence, it being there tends to create that stimulative nature. And I only see that with a bucket feeder. And that really tends to improve the overall attitude of a colony, especially late in the year. And I've seen just time and time again, tremendously improves the overall queen acceptance rate. So that's why for us, we try to get feed on ahead of these late season splits, and we keep the feed on during that queen acceptance time period. We're getting ready to finish up the last of the splits here. And as it's getting so late, the reason why we're waiting so late this year is for this this trial that Bruce and I have kind of been alluding to, that we'll talk a lot more about later. But you know, how we are going about making splits this late in the year is similar to what Bruce talked about. We have a little bit different of a luxury than Bruce. I think Bruce went about that way because he could get it all done, or mostly all done, in one day. He can get the brood up, the queen below, an excluder in between, get the bottom box moved off, and then add that queen to that top box that's now, you know, mostly brood, but there will be field force that will be trickling in there. For us, we take it one extra step, and I think what Bruce is doing works. But we go one extra insurance policy. Is yes, we have feed on, which is really important. One of the things that I like to do right now is, as I'm going through these colonies that we're going to be splitting, you know, I'll take an extra box with me. I'll take the lid off the top of the colony, lay that down, and put the spare box in on top of that lid. Now I'm digging, as I start to dig through and pull out the brood, I'm actually building the top box as I do that. And if I look at the frames, okay, I'll look. If I get lucky and find that queen on that outside sidewall, then I'm done, right? Because I can just set her aside. I can move my brood box over. That queen in the frame she's in stays in the bottom, and we can really move quickly. But otherwise, we're shaking the bees off, and I'm building the brood box that's going to go above. I'm building that off to the side, and I'm going to make sure I'm stashing brood away, specifically some open brood that's just getting capped, along with some capped brood and food and a little bit of room to lay in that box off to the side. Once that's built, and I'm sure the queen is not on any of those, I like to move that up above an excluder. That bottom box down below, like this time of year, what I would really prefer to do is put a frame feeder in and put that second box on that they're going to finish out in for the rest of the year. So that colony all of a sudden looks like the bottom box has the original queen. Okay. The box above it has some frames that they need to fill out. It's going to be their wintering box, and in there is a frame feeder. Okay. That gets filled. Now above that goes a queen excluder. Above the queen excluder goes this box of brood that I just pulled from that bottom box. That's going to come up above that excluder, and I'm going to put a lid on it, and I'm going to put a bucket feeder on it. What I like to do is come back 24 hours later, pull off that top brood box with the bucket feeder, remove the queen excluder, and put a double screen board and put everything right back. As I'm putting everything back, that's when I slip in the queen. At this point, everything that's going to be that high up in the colony is going to be all the nurse bees. Everything tending to all of that brood. All the field force is going to be busy back in those bottom boxes, pulling some feed, servicing those bottom two boxes. They have no business being up there with the brood. So it helps me to isolate those two. So now I've got two colonies living in that same vertical space. Now I don't have to get in a hurry on getting it kicked out to a different out yard or anything right away. If I was set up a little bit better, I could move those, but it's a lot of orchestration to do that all at once. So for now, I like to just build them up vertically using that double screen board. And then when that happens, I can come back in a week. And in a week, both colonies have had plenty of feed. I can check on the feed for both. I can check and make sure that queen is out. And if she is, she's above a double screen board. They can just rock and roll in that same vertical space until I get everything finalized and know what all my counts are. From that point, I can just move boxes and then put those onto 4-way pallets. Then those can go out to a new yard. But not only, I wait until I make sure that in that vertical space, the bottom one's queen right, the one above it's queen right. When they both are queen right, now I know, boom, I'll take that top asset off, and then I'll move that to its own spot on a 4-way, and preferably take that out to a new yard. You don't have to go through that extreme, but it's really nice because it lowers the risk of there being a failure that happens. If you move all that equipment somewhere else and then there's a failure, now you have a little colony who's maybe not queen right, taking up the space and a pallet in a separate yard, who probably stands no chance to move forward. Now there's just all this back and forth you have to do to either undo all of that, move that somewhere else. So for me, for me personally, just trying to wait, make sure everything's queen right in that vertical space, and then move it out. For some reason, if something happened, if they didn't like the queen, if I screwed up or a queen jumped from box to box or anything happened, and the top box doesn't take the queen that's above that double screen board, no problem, because then I'll just combine everything all at once right there on the spot. And as we finish out the rest of the year, equalizing and doing all that, then that'll be a colony temporarily. That'll be one box bigger. So that's something to think about, utilizing a double screen board to make these splits later on in the year. And it's really neat because if you're making the splits in your home wintering yard, or even if you're not, but if that split doesn't quite take off, or it's really, really late in the year, as long as they take, you're probably golden because they're above a double screen board. So if they never get past 5 or 6 or 7 frames of bees, they're already on top of a double screen board on top of a strong colony. Like, you're kind of squared away to just leave them in that spot if you need to, if that works for whatever your wintering logistics and strategy is. So just a neat idea to keep in the back of your mind for later, using a double screen board in this way to make those late season splits.
When using pallets, which direction do you face the entrance when you do the double screen board?
Doesn't matter. Yep, doesn't matter. If we've got the extra box, and I'm, if I'm in doubles down below, then I can have that. I've got no problem having the double screen board, and then the next box where the entrances are both going the same way. If it's a single box, I'm just in doubles when I do this, then I'll kick that double screen board entrance to the back side, which is kind of the in-between alley, in between that 4-way. And those bees have no trouble at all exiting and coming and going from the middle part of a 4-way. Yep. So there are so many different ways to do all this kind of thing, and there's no right way or wrong way. There's just the one that you figured out works the best in that time,
That's probably maybe the safest way to do it. I'm not sure, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. I debate back and forth about moving the queen or moving the new split off. I've done it both ways. This time I moved the queen because I felt like if I left population is so important too down here with the pests we have with the hive beetles and stuff. We have to have a strong population. And so my thought process is that if I, since I'm not using double screens as you talk about, that would probably be the best way to do it. But since I'm moving one box, I felt like if I move the stronger box away that has the existing queen in it, assuming she's doing a good job, then she won't even skip a beat. There'll be no stress at all as far as, trying to accept a new queen in that colony, doing queen right, and they'll hit the ground running. And hopefully they'll maintain enough population back there if they have plenty of brood and nurse bees to be able to not miss a beat. And then the forager can come back and help increase the population. I'm not sure if that's the wisest thing to do, because are the foragers the ones that actually are better accepting the queen, or is it the nurse bees? You know what I mean? That's another thing to consider. So I don't know. I don't want to move the top box, the queenless box, away and then have all the bees leave and come back to the, and then that new queen be in there with little population, not have a chance. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But what tends to happen to me, usually the queens, even whether Michael Palmer, your queens, Zach's queens, most of the time the queens do tend to get accepted at a very high percentage. Usually the problem comes after they're out and after moving around, making sure they maintain the strength to really have a chance.
Right.
That's where I struggle a little bit, if keeping the strength strong enough to get them really rocking and rolling. In the spring, it's not much of an issue usually, but this time of the year, the populations can change so quickly, and with the just the harsh conditions, sometimes it gets real hot and humid. If it rains constantly for a few days or whatever happens, it just is crazy how the population could change so quickly. And so that's the trick to me is like I say, most of the time I have a real high acceptance. I look in there, the new queens, and they're walking around, but then I come back and a month later and they're starting to fail for whatever reason. And so that's kind of where I struggle a little bit. The acceptance is, I say that and I'll have an issue this time, but typically acceptance is usually pretty good. But that's, you hate to go back and check on a colony, 2 weeks later and there's like half a frame of bees in there. Little queen trying to walk around and there's spotty brood. There's not, and she's trying to lay a few eggs and there's just no resources for her. And, I hate to find that condition, which can happen at times too, especially if you split in the same yard. And theoretically, I guess that could happen with a double screen as well, because the bees the foragers still will go back down to the stronger colony. So you just gotta, I guess feeding them is the key in that case, because if you got mostly nurse bees up there, in any situation, most of the nurse bees, they're not going to be out foraging for food. And so you need to make sure you're feeding them and give them a chance to mature a little bit and get out and start foraging. Is that what you think?
We got to think about the dynamic of the workforce inside of the colony. If you're making that split, and they don't have a workforce with them, and it's just nothing but brood, and you move them to a new location and you don't give them feed, it's going to be some time before they've got a big enough force to go out and get the food. If that happens, your queen, she might not want to lay at all because there's no incoming nectar and there's not enough food resources on a frame. What tends to happen with those type of splits is they are the most vulnerable and susceptible. And it seems as though, I don't know this to be fact, but what I've seen is, those colonies that are heavier in nurse brood, they're not equipped to fight raging robbing like those older, more mature, meaner field force bees. And so you might have a 2 or 3 frame split. It might all be young nurse bees. Not a lot of the bees are going in and out because they're not old enough to. Those are the ones that can get absolute massacred quick. And then you can have the other extreme. You can make a split with nothing but old field force, and they'll barely accept a queen and maybe want to supersede her because they've got an attitude problem, or they're just more difficult, more challenging. Queen acceptance is very easily blamed on the queen breeder. I would argue that probably 70 to 80% of queen acceptance is the beekeeper practice. What is the condition of the colonies, when, why, and how you're splitting it makes such a big difference. That's one reason why we go through the aggravation this time of year to pull everything up above an excluder. What we're doing is we're pulling that brood up. So the only thing that really is belonging in that scenario is that brood, but it's living in that same vertical space. When we pull that up, remove the excluder and then insert the double screen board, I like to do that. My mother queen, she's down below. The field force is down there with her. They're fine. They're going to keep building. I can afford to rob some more brood from that and bring it up because she can keep brooding up. But above, there's going to be a timeline, a delay in the brood cycles, and I want to try to keep them both as close to the same size as I can. So by moving them up above the double screen, any of those older bees, when they hit and leave that double screen, whatever's left, they're going to go back down below in that bottom box. So it's going to be a very young colony on top.
That's right.
That really helps big time for queen acceptance, which is also super important. However, that we are keeping a bucket feeder on there, and if needed, a little piece of pollen patty, so that those young bees that are in that colony who can't go forage, over the next week or two, they will be, and they'll get caught back up. But in that really important 14-day time period from the time that we introduce that queen, I'm making sure that I am supplementing them with enough feed that they're not living just hand to mouth. They if they want to store a little bit, they can, but it really helps. There's a certain dynamic. I don't have the words. There's probably somebody who's way smarter than me who can put it way more elegantly or eloquently. Something happens to bees when they know that their needs are being met. When there are inbound resources, they just perform and they act differently. And if you don't believe me, try starving a colony out and seeing how they react to you opening a lid and getting inside versus a colony who you keep a bucket feeder on through that time period. Completely different behavior. So there's a stimulative nature of the bees that we can leverage, especially late in the year, for splits specifically for queen introduction. But that's how we're going to go about doing it. And then when we do that, we're going to have very fresh young queens. We're going to have a lot of post solstice queens, which I absolutely love too. And we're going to have hopefully some interesting things to share over the course of the next year about performance on this particular trial, on what we're working with these bees here. Bruce, before we go any further, I've got a bunch of questions and comments and things starred. I don't even, let me first, we got a new log in here. I don't know that I've seen this name before, but Feathers, I want to thank you for your $5 super chat tonight. They've got a question here. It says, if I have weak hives and keep them in my garage for the winter, will they make it until spring? Bruce, I'll let you take that one.
I guess that depends on the conditions in the garage and where you're at. Down here, that wouldn't work because they get out and forage. It gets warm enough down here. Unless it's open, if you have the door open, they can get in and out. Then they might. But I would, that's not a great idea. It wouldn't work here because unless you can keep it a pretty cool temperature. I think that up north, Greg, I'm not sure about Ohio, but I know you get on further north into Canada and the northern parts of the United States where you're sub-zero for days on end, and they do put them in sheds, but they keep those sheds at a perfect temperature so the bees are not flying. They stay in the hives, and they have plenty of food stores, and they just kind of basically winterize them, keep them at a certain temperature so they're not too bitter cold, but it never gets warm enough for the bees to fly. If you put them in your garage and it's warm in that garage, they'll want to get out and fly and try to forage and do things, and they'll get in trouble. They won't work. So I would say if you're in a vast majority of the country, I would not do that. You just need to kind of winterize them, get them ready outside, make sure they're good and strong, have plenty of food, and the bees are pretty equipped to make it through winter in most places. But down here, that wouldn't work at all.
Great answer to that, Bruce. And Bruce, I want to thank you for your $20 super chat tonight. Hashtag Stream Team, hashtag Summer Beekeeping, hashtag Be the Lighthouse, and our super secret, top secret buddy who couldn't be on tonight for reasons we can't disclose. Give us a nice $20 super chat. Brian, thanks for that. Hashtag Stream Team, hashtag Week Away, hashtag I hope Tara doesn't find out that he snuck away to tune into the Stream Team on his night off. We got a bunch more questions starred and ready to go. We're going to do some rapid fire Q&A right after this. All right, got a lot of great questions here. Garrison Apiaries, and I wonder if that's Aaron Garrison. Is August considered late season? Well, Bruce, here in Ohio, splitting in August is not something the vast majority of beekeepers do. It's a little bit more of, I think, advanced technique, and it's done so for very specific reasons. But by and large, most folks are going to be doing their splits and their increase in the spring of the year when the bees are just naturally wanting to do that. During that prime and peak swarm and flow season is when most folks are taking care of that. So is August considered late? It's considered late for splits and for growth. However, it is not late in the overall season quite yet. When we get into October, late to me is when brooding is really done or the bees are drawing back. When we get into October for sure and November, that's when we see that on average years. But Bruce is in Alabama. What would you consider late season in Alabama, Bruce?
It's similar here. I would just kind of delay it. You know, it's a little bit behind what you're talking about. We always have brood here throughout the year, even in the winter months. There's some brood in most of the colonies. Certain varieties of bees have way more brood than others, but there's rarely do you go into a colony without. If I went into a hive that had 0 brood, I would be a little concerned. Even the Carniolans, Caucasians, all of them have a little patch of brood in the wintertime here. Though it does get, you know, reasonably cold enough for them to brood down, but then we'll have a day where it's 70 degrees a couple of days, or there'll be a little trickle of something coming in, and it keeps them stimulated enough to lay a little bit. But I would say, I kind of like what you said, Greg, that, you know, there is a period of time in the fall coming up where, you know, they actually start seeing drones again, and they, you know, they'll kind of build back. They start to build back up a little bit in the fall, a little bit before the winter comes. Maybe they're making winter bees, or maybe they just tend to grow a little bit sometimes in the fall. And my buddy Tyler, the commercial guy down here, he makes a lot of splits like in September, October. He doesn't make a lot of splits right now, but you even start seeing drones again, some here in the fall in certain, you know, certain varieties of bees in certain spots. And so I would say it depends. It's kind of a little bit late for 2025, later in the season. We're past the production, we're past the growth phase, like you said, Greg, but we're actually at the very beginning of the 2026 season, if you want to look at it that way. But for 2025 year, you know, we're in a critical time, like in certain parts of the year, early in the year, when winter is past and when spring hits and the bees when they're in swarm mode and a little bit beyond there, that's when everything's going good. That's when they're in growth mode. That's when everything's happening and happy. But this time of the year right now is a critical time of the year. It's a very difficult time of the year. It's probably, in my opinion, almost the most tricky time of year to figure out. I don't know if I've really figured it out yet, but I'm trying to get there. And it's also inconsistent. But is it late in the year? I guess it depends on how you define late. I would say late in the year would be more like you say, Greg, more the October, November, December range. But there's different ways to look at it.
Awesome. Well, Noble Honey, shout out to Noble Honey. Looks like he's located in Maumee, Ohio, 40 miles south of the Ambassador Bridge. So, Noble Honey, first time I've seen that handle. So, welcome to the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. We've got a question here from Red Creek Honey Company, Vermilion, Ohio. I think that's the first time I've seen that handle come across there too. So, welcome back, or welcome the first time, Red Creek. Greg, think you'll get into wax dipped 2-way pallets? Great question. We dip a ton of pallets every year. So if you're interested in 2-ways or 4-ways, let us know and we can talk about that. We wax dip all of our pallets. It's just one extra step, one extra thing that we can do to make sure that when we're building and investing in equipment, it's going to be my grandkids' problem, not mine, and not my kids. So, great question. Mr. Mark Zenner, I want to thank you for your super chat. Had a couple second-year queens not resume laying well after Apogard treatments. It's been a month since treatment. My other hives recovered fast. Pinch and requeen. My first time using Apogard. That is a great question, and we are going to be entering into a lot of Apogard and Formant questions here, for sure. Bruce, have you had any experience using Apogard or having queens have some performance issues when using Apogard?
I've used it a couple of times. I used it last year actually, and it does seem to slow them down a little bit, but I haven't really observed that it completely shuts them down or, you know, eliminates the queen or basically makes them incapacitates them. But I don't have enough experience with Apogard to really talk too much on that. I know you've used a lot more than I have, probably.
I would say if it's, based on the info in front of us here, we've got a second-year queen who is not laying well, or she's not got back to laying after Apigard. It's been an entire month since the treatment, and the other hives have recovered fast. Pinch and requeen is the question. I would say absolutely. What I have seen, Apigard can work really well, but one of the things that I find that it does, which is very hard for me to want to put on right now, is, it has really about a temperature threshold, according to the label, of 105 Fahrenheit, which I think is outlandish. I've had very poor results personally using Apigard in the 90s, but that was based on the bane of my existence, which is like 5/5s. Those are extremely fickle for a lot of reasons. I love them, but they are very fickle. Not ideal for Apigard. So I don't know what these configurations were, but I have seen queens shut down. I have seen some queens not rebound from Apigard, and I've seen the same from other treatments as well. You're now in the timeline, however. With Apigard, if you're somewhere in the 20-day time frame of the product, the bees have only been without it for maybe 7 to 10 days, depending on the exact dates and timeline. So if it's been 30 days, if it's been a month, I wouldn't write her off necessarily yet. I'd give her one more week and see what she does. Sometimes what I've seen is after a treatment, just when you think what's going on, there's no eggs, you come back that next week and look, and she is just firing away like you have not seen for quite some time. So I would wait and pause just long enough to see if she's just waiting to rebound. Make sure there's no other circumstances in the colony. Is there bee bread? Is there pollen? Is there nectar? Do they have incoming food? If all those check boxes are yes, and they have a good population, and there's an open place for her to lay, and she's still not laying, I wouldn't let it hang out more than 1 week before you make a move to possibly requeen that. But that's a great question, and that's one of the things we were talked about earlier, Bruce. Those 1-year queens, they offer a lot of buffer and resistance to some of the things like this. But Apigard will, in my opinion, 100% shut a queen down in that time frame.
And last year when I used it, it is temperature sensitive in that if you want to use a full dose, you better not do it if it's really hot. What I did last year, the first time I put it on, I did. The first time I put it on, the temperatures were fine. I did a full dose. And then I came back with 2 more treatments of a half dose after that because it got hot again. And it got above whatever the temperature threshold is on that. If you can use it when it's hot, but you got to decrease the dose on it down to whatever it tells you. If you have too much in there, it can absolutely just fry the colony or mess them up. Same thing with formic. Formic, you can't. You got to make sure you're utilizing it within the whatever the packaging says, I would say. But yeah, I don't have enough experience with it to really say as far as queen shutdown. I have noticed though with formic, Greg, what you said. Formic, I think pretty much always will just shut down the queen laying at least for a couple of days for the most part. But then what I've seen is it's almost like they reset sometimes and they come back laying better than they were before. And so,
yeah.
But I haven't used that much either. So those are 2 treatments I'm not as experienced with.
They're both a little bit tricky.
They are. Yeah, they're a little bit risky.
I love the thymol aspect though of Apigard for a lot of reasons. I think it's doing a little more than just for mites inside of a colony. I have seen less issues with Apigard, hands down, than formic. But formic, for sure, I think is much better at just totally eliminating mites from a colony. But both are great. Both do serve a purpose, but you got to understand the nuance. And I wish everything was equal. There's no such thing as all things equal when you're applying these products. I've mentioned this several times now, but 1 year we absolutely nuked a little over 100 5 colonies using Apigard. That same number of frames and bees in a 10 frame box, no problem. But in a 5/5 scenario, it ran them just plumb out, and that was a less than ideal conversation at the dinner table. to say, hey, by the way, you know, that nuke yard that we were really excited about next year's growth, well, nearly all the bees absconded. That's less than ideal, but there's no silver bullets. There's no easy answer. It's not as simple as using a hygienic queen or using Apigard or not using any of them, or there is no easy path forward. You just have to be cognizant and mindful enough of where you are at with your bees, what that direction looks like, and just keep moving in that positive direction, which I think we all could agree on. The positive direction is the bees being healthy and vibrant and booming in the spring, whatever that might take. What a great question. Thanks for that. And for your super chat, Mark Zenner. This is a great comment from Cajun Homestead earlier. We were talking about some colonies, you know, having a disadvantages dynamically on maybe some vulnerabilities. And Cajun Homestead here, hive beetles will take advantage of a hive during requeening. The hive doesn't seem to push them into the corners when they're queenless. I love that comment because it kind of reaffirms something that I've seen, but in a different way. We talked about moving those splits, Bruce, and if you get a colony where it's just nothing but young nurse bees and they've got that fresh queen, they don't have that mature field force, I think, to help protect at that entrance. They're just not, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? They're just not mature or spicy enough in that sense. I think the same thing happens when we've got colonies that are running hive beetles around too. You know, sure, you could maybe have cleanup bees and somewhere in that mid-age range that are the ones moving the beetles around. But I have seen that the colonies that have that older, mature field force, they're the ones that are running the hive beetles up. They're crowling them to the top of the colony. They go as far as creating a propolis corral around them and then glue that to the lid. You crack open the lid, you see a little fairy circle, and the hive beetles just evacuating that little circle. I don't see that happening, even if they're large colonies, but if they are dominated by young brood, if they don't have the mature field force, I don't see them corralling and moving up hive beetles as much. So that's a good observation, Cajun Homestead. Bruce, we got a question from the one and only Mr. Sam Mixon for Bruce here. Mr. Sam asks, Mr. Bruce, what to your clover that you were planting in one of your videos?
Yeah, I did a video like several years ago where I was planting some clover. I was just overseeding with clover around some of my yards, and it did not go well. I purchased quite a bit of clover. I probably walked hand spread that clover seed over 3 or 4 acres that day. 5 8. I mean, I just walked and just did the old hand spreader, and some of it did come up. It was just white clover. It wasn't Dutch white clover, but it was a variety of that. Sam, I don't remember the exact strain of it, but I ended up. Some of it did come up. A little bit of it did, but it's no longer really thriving at all. I spread it too late in the season. I spread it. My thought process was if I spread it in this fall, it might be ready to bloom and come up in the spring. But when I spread it, it was really at the very, very end of when you're supposed to spread it. I spread it in late October, I think, and then it didn't rain for like 2 or 3 weeks after that. Really didn't have much of a chance. And if I ever decide to plant clover again, I'll do some more research. I should probably take that video down, but it has had some views, and I do know people have spread overseeded with clover before, but it just didn't work for me that year. And I think I did about everything wrong you could do as far as the timing of it, and then it didn't rain, and so it didn't really have a chance to germinate like it needed to. It a little, like I said, a little bit of it grew, but it never really had the stand of nice clover I wanted to have.
Yeah.
What I found though is here, we just have plenty of different things coming in when the clover will be blooming, and we do have some wild clover. There's some crimson clover around, and also there is some Dutch white clover around that just out there naturally. And but a majority of our bees, majority of our honey is not the clover. I don't think a majority of it's from other sources. But I hope that answers your question, Sam. It was not. I should have done a follow up on it, but it did come up very little, but not much.
Clover's a great asset to have.
Greg, have you
A lot of
planted
folks up
some?
here,
Have you,
they'll do a frost seeding of it, you know, and let
what
it
does that
get
mean?
poured into the soil.
What
Well,
does that mean?
at the end of the year, like in the winter before the spring, during that last pump and pull of the soil when it's freezing, thawing,
Okay.
will broadcast clover right onto the surface, and then
Okay.
through that freeze thaw cycle, it would actually suck that clover seed down just below that surface, and then it's there. So when the conditions are right, then it springs up. That tends to work out pretty good.
That would have been better for me to do it probably in the spring. Thought process was I'll get it coming up in the wintertime and then it'll be blooming in early in the spring, but really it would have been better to do it later in the year. That's if I had to do it again, I would either do it earlier in the fall or I would do it in the spring. Probably do it in the spring. And even if it didn't bloom that first year, at least it would be established for the second year. But
Right.
you know, it gets so hot here. You know, our in some areas clover just blooms if you mow it. I guess you can take care of it in a way that it'll keep blooming over and over again throughout the season, throughout the year. But here it just gets so hot that it really kind of just burns up after, you know, you get into July, you know, and it's just usually just kind of burned up by late June or July around here,
Yeah.
along with everything else.
Yep. Great question from Via Honeybees. Great questions. We know where those come from. Probably Melissa. Greg, has anyone built a bigger Nature's Image Farm bucket pyramid than ours yet? And you might be thinking, what on earth are you talking about? What is a bucket pyramid? Well, I'm glad you asked. Look at that. Would you just look at that? That's beautiful. A sight to behold. No one really knows where it came from. They just know they woke up one morning, crop circles and everything else, and then this bucket pyramid. To answer that question right now, Tom and Melissa Sosman, hailing from the great state of Missouri, are the ones are currently holding the Nature's Image Farm Bucket Feeder Pyramid Challenge. So as of right now, you're still in the first place running.
We need to know how many buckets that was, first of all. Do they know? They count
I
them?
think it was around 60.
It's got to be more than 60.
I don't know. Can you count? I don't know if I can count that high.
I think it's got to
Can
be
we
more than
count,
60.
can we count that high? Let's see.
Let's see,
1, 2, 3,
11,
4,
10.
5, 6, 7. Pardon the reach there, Tom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then 9 is 19. And then 8 is 27.
It might be. Yeah, it might be about 60. I don't know.
I bet it's 60. Yep.
Okay.
There we go. So no, as of right now, Tom and Melissa still the champs. Still,
All right. They've laid down the gauntlet. It's a challenge, though. So
there's a challenge
somebody needs to buy a bunch of buckets from you and get busy.
right on our
Stack 'em.
website, naturesimagefarm.com. If you'd like those in bulk or wholesale, shoot us a message, and we do bulk pricing on those as well. Great question here from Jason Seward. I'm struggling to interpret my mite washes because I keep getting zeros. Even pulled 10 drone cells from each of the hives I tested and still found none. Come on, give it up. That's a great spot to be in.
Yeah, I think that's pretty darn good.
I think a lot of folks have found that while mite washes are not perfect, they are a tremendous indicator and are an extremely helpful tool on which direction that we need to go with our colonies. Jason's asking himself, what am I doing wrong? Is this the right fluid? Is it the right wash cup? Did I take the sample from the right spot of the colony? And then he's thinking, well, let me go to some drone cells and see what I see. I think if you went in there and pulled, if you did 10 sets of 10 on the drone cells and you're finding like 0 to 1 mites per 10, that's I think is a secondary affirming indicator of what you're seeing in your mite wash for sure. What you don't want to see is you split your boxes, and then when you split them, all that drone brood that's jammed up in between there, and you start to see all the open, exposed drone brood. What you don't want to see is mites running around on those like rampant. That's cause for alarm for sure. But what I have found is mite washes are a fantastic tool of an indicator on whether or not I'm going to treat. For some colonies, that if they are breeder queens and I'm specifically monitoring colonies, you know, they may not get washed at all, or they may not get treated at all. But for other production colonies and things that are out there, I'm using those mite washes as that indicator. What are those numbers? And it's also a great comparative tool, yard to yard. And even if I happen to have multiple years of genetics in there, is there a certain year or lineage that's doing better than the other? So mite washes are one of the most underused tools that can be so helpful for a lot of different things. If you're finding zeros and ones, give yourself a round of applause. Actually, give the bees a round of applause. There you go. See? Bruce knows the joke. It could be for a bunch of reasons, but if you're finding zeros this late in the year, boy, that makes me excited. That really pumps me up. I think you're heading in the right direction. I wouldn't stop with the washes though. I would, you know, every 2 weeks or so, maybe give them another wash to see where you're at. But I'm excited for you because that would lead me to believe if I was finding zeros in my colonies, I'm not going. I'm not raising the mite alarm bell. I wouldn't even be planning for any kind of harsh treatments. If anything, I would just continue to monitor, and then if treating is a part of your practice, then I would consider something like OAV just to keep those numbers static or pinned back as you are continue to watch them. But I would love to see it. We are seeing. Gosh, I don't know if I want to say this out loud. We're sort of seeing an abnormal mite season this year, and an abnormal hive beetle season. And I'm not sure if that has to do with, I don't know, maybe the -29 wind chill that we had for a few days straight last winter. But what I'm not seeing is alarming mite counts or hive beetle numbers. I think in total this year, and I'm talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of repetitions of colonies, I've maybe seen less than 20 hive beetles all season long. And as far as mites go, like right now, the mite, we're low. We're under our 2% threshold to get serious about treating with anything. Even here in the learning yard, which we intentionally install package bees in so our package bee customers can follow the timing and timeline along with their bees. I mean, those are low. Like we're holding at like 0 and 1%. We're finding or 0.3 to 1% is kind of where we're at. That's very encouraging. Just because it's low now does not mean it will be low a month from now. So keep monitoring. Don't let up. But for now, we don't have to go into freak out mode. Like, oh my gosh, I've got 6% mite counts. It's 98 degrees and I still have honey supers on. That's a tight spot to be on. So for now, enjoy the spot that you're in. Let's see here. Oh, Mr. Craig Wolf. I think was it Wolf or Wolf? But if it's the Craig Wolf, I think I know. I've met him and his wife several times here. So if it's them, good to see you again. If it's a different Craig, well, thanks anyways for your comment here. And it ties into what we just talked about. When doing OAV from the back of the hive, should the entrance be covered with a damp towel? Bruce, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think if you're treating from the back, it would be a good idea to cover the entrance. I don't know if it has to be damp, but at least cover it is what I would probably recommend.
Yeah, for sure. I've had a little bit of experience from the back. Since we back then changed the bowl to the different kind of a setup where it was more economical to go through the front and ergonomical to go through the front. We've done it from the front. But I would 100% say from the back, you definitely want to close that front off during that time period. That would be probably best practice. But truth be told, Bruce and I would be fibbing up here if we said that we close off every hive every time when we're treating with OAV. I know I don't.
No, I don't either.
And it's
Treating
mostly
from the
just
front.
time
Treating from the front, it shoots it in there really good, and the INSTANTVAP shoots it in so harsh, so hard and intensely. I I typically don't cover the entrance, but maybe you should, but I typically don't. But if you're going from the back, I used to treat from the back when I used the original Larabis or the old Jono's Easy Vape, and I would put a towel on the entrance when I did that. But I didn't usually wet it down. I just stuffed a towel on the entrance. That's what I would do.
Yeah. Couple follow-up questions here from DC's Bees. Greg, do you think that the lower national mite load could be because of the big winter die-off? And our pal Brian Zavada from Colorado, Flower Street Farms Bees, Jen and Brian, do you think a lot of the mites died with the heavy colony winter losses? I mean, yes, but I don't know if it was directly. I mean, we're not in an area where we've got pollination bees or a lot of migratory beekeeping going on. You know, we're migratory, but just in our region. So possibly, yes. I mean, is it a factor? For sure. But what I really think the biggest factor was it's extreme weather. Nationwide, you know, I don't know if they're above average, below average, or on par. And let's say the Smoky Mountain area or the Rocky Mountain area where we get out to the plains, you know, areas, those are going to, I think that can play into it for sure. If those were weaker, heavy mite populated colonies that were the big ones that were dying off, I think we've had enough data has came in from real beekeepers. When I mean real, I mean not just part of a study or like folks who say, hey, here's what we actually saw. A lot of these folks weren't seeing high mite counts at all at the end of last year going into the winter time. But I think what a lot of folks are seeing, which is the big alarm, is the propensity for a colony to be expressing high viral transmission and have low mite counts. I think that is something that we are going to have to tackle in a big way moving forward. That could be a piece of this puzzle. So yes, it's important that we're chasing mites, but it does no good if we have hygienic bees that are trying to remove bees that are trying to remove mites out of the equation or try to remove diseased pupa out. Those things are helpful. It's helpful to be doing mite washes and to be doing treatments. But the fact of the matter is, there is still going to be a mite population in the colony, and if it only takes a very light or low or seemingly no mite population in the colony to transmit a severe virus, we are shifting into a whole new world of beekeeping. And then this has been on my heart, and my gut is bound up that I think this feels like is where we're going. If that's the case, Formic's not going to save you. OAV is not going to save you. And our hygienic bees are not going to save us either. We're going to have bees that are more resistant to viruses, a sturdier bee that has a better bolstered immune system that can withstand those things. That is my dream. That's the thing that I want to see in my lifetime as a beekeeper, is bees that could care less about mites because their immune system is strong enough, robust enough that they can withstand and be exposed to viruses and not fall flat on their face. It's too late for me to get on a pulpit about that, so I'm going to jump off of that for now. A couple last questions here from Spencer Cox. Do you harvest goldenrod honey, or do you leave it all for the bees for winter? Bruce, do you get much goldenrod honey?
It varies. We get right now we've got cotton coming in, and sometimes they put goldenrod in. I think sometimes they don't, but I don't. I typically just let them keep it for winter. I've got plenty of honey from my regular harvest.
Yeah, we're in a tricky situation here because the spring and summer flow was enough for the bees to brood up, to build up, and was great for building nukes. But from that moment on, to build a honey crop, they just didn't do it. We got drowned with cold, wet weather. And then after all the blooms were gone, we got heat with a heat wave. And then so they didn't produce. So that being said, you know, we've got enough honey to sell, thank God. But we are not in the shape that we wanted to be in. So if we were able to capture some of the fall honey, I think it would be helpful, but it's a limited product, meaning it is not something that we can bottle and put on a shelf and expect it to be a consumable product for a customer in a plastic squeeze bottle. Not going to happen. It's going to be a nightmare for the customer and then for us. So it has some limitations. I think where it does make sense and where it is beautiful, however, we've got a beautiful Maxent creamer here. And so taking goldenrod honey and completely emulsifying and dissolving those crystals and then controlling that crystallization through the creaming process, we could turn the frown upside down and turn that beautiful, rich, very sweet fall late honey into creamed honey products. But that's not going to be ideal for a 1 pound plastic squeeze bottle customer. So a great question. And then I want to thank Collector Rick's Honeybees gifted 1 Nature's Image Farm membership. So that's huge. Thank you so much for doing that. We've been busy putting content out on our membership channel, exclusive Learning Yard content. When we meet here in the shop, those Q&As go out, and then the video from the Learning Yard of going through those hives also go out. And so many folks love that because they're able to watch that, even though they've come and they can watch at their own time one more time to give them some more information, that extra piece of confidence as they go to work their colonies. And then for some folks who can't make it here, who aren't a part of our local Learning Yard crowd, they can tune in and still learn all these tips and tricks. There's a lot of things that we talk about with beekeeping. There's just not enough time. I mean, we've gone on for over 2 hours now. And I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface of all the things that we wanted to talk about. So there's a lot of things that we just don't have the time or ability to talk about on this platform that we can in these Learning Yard Q&As, or that we can do out in the field and in the Learning Yard. So I like that those videos have a home and a place and an audience for that. So for $5 a month, folks can become a member to this YouTube channel, and they can check in and they can watch all the Learning Yard content and all some of the behind the scenes things here too. So again, Collector Rick's Honeybees, I want to thank you for gifting a membership for someone for Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel. And a big special shout out to the one, the only, Mr. Brian Lee. Thanks, buddy, for that $20 super chat. He writes here, love my EnduraHive wax dipped boxes, hashtag EnduraHive. Brian, really appreciate you and your support and all the folks in Alabama at the club there for all you guys' support. It really means a lot to us and a lot of fun, exciting things to come. Speaking of exciting things to come, Bruce, what is on deck this week at Bruce's Bees?
Well, I just hope to be able to get out and check on some of these queens, both from you and Zach, that I haven't checked on yet. And that's the main thing, just peeking in on overall condition of the colonies, see how they're doing. I'll have to move pretty quick. I got a lot of colonies, and I only have 1 day this week to peek in on. Maybe working Friday. So anyway, that's what I got on tap. I do have some footage. I'd like to get some stuff edited and out. I'm just having a hard time getting that done lately, but we'll see what happens.
There's never enough time. One thing my grandpa said that I'll never forget is there is never enough time or money at the same time to do all the things that you want to do. So you just have to do the best you can with what you've got, where you are, and just move forward the best you can. I think that is the overarching mantra for us this year is forward momentum at all times, every colony, every time. Forward momentum. Sometimes forward momentum looks like tipping that box up on its side so that handful of bees in those frames get moved on to another colony to create forward momentum. But this is the time of year, guys. Don't get comfortable. You get comfortable, you become complacent, and we all know what happens next. Complacency kills. That's when these colonies get robbed up. They're not strong enough. They're not going to make it. Make those tough calls and decide, hey, are you moving forward or are you moving backward? Are you an asset or are you a liability? And make those tough calls, move those boxes, move those frames, get the nutrition that they need. If it's a fresh queen, if it's a little more room, if it's a little syrup in a bucket feeder, whatever it takes, get those bees moving forward. And I hope that folks start reporting over these next couple of streams, Bruce, that they're finding low mites. I would love to keep seeing that as a trend this year. And maybe we're making a little bit of headway. There's a lot of fun things going on. We're going to talk a lot more about this secret queen project. There's a lot more to that story. I've got a video coming out to talk more about that too. Brian just released a fantastic video with, in my opinion, probably the most influential mind, the most influential person in the agricultural space, possibly agricultural and political space. Brian had the honor of interviewing the one and only, the lunatic farmer himself, Joel Salatin. What an awesome opportunity that Brian was blessed with. If you haven't checked out that video, make sure you go to the Castle Hives channel and check out that interview that Brian did with Joel Salatin. What an unbelievable man, has done so much for the agricultural space. I know you'll love that. You'll love him as much as we do too. So be sure to check that one out. Man, other than that, one last final reminder for our local crowd here. The shop is open this Friday from 10 to 5, but on Saturday, we are closed all day. We're closed every Sunday, but Saturday, we are closed this week as we go pay our respects to a great man and beekeeper, local beekeeper, Bill Fountain. If you would, keep the Fountain family in your thoughts and prayers, but just know the shop, the store is closed this Saturday and the learning yard is canceled, but we are going to do a virtual learning yard. I'm going to go out Friday and I'm going to shoot video going through all those colonies so you guys can still stay up to speed as to what's going on, so you can help make good choices and decisions in your yard based on what we're seeing out here with ours. And if you have questions for us for that learning yard video, leave them in the comments of this and also any other announcement video. We'll field those questions in that video and we will post that video out as a virtual learning yard Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. So just another way that we can stay connected, even though that we can't personally be here for you. A lot of great things on the horizon. So many things that are on my heart. They're on my mind. We've already gone past 2 hours. Can't get into all of those things. But now is everything to everything a season, and there's a season for everything. Right now, it's make or break. Make a call. Move those colonies forward. Winter is coming, ready or not. Until next week, we want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Hey, are you looking for honey processing equipment that's built to last a lifetime and actually built in the USA? Are you looking for the very best and wax-dipped equipment? Or maybe the beefiest wooden frames and foundation on the market? Check us out at nature'simagefarm.com and let's make Made in America great again.